Next step. Step 14. Attach short frame spacer number 7 and cable guide number 24 to the frames. Okay, so short frame spacer. Now this is where your cable guide, you know, we pointed out that it's not bent 90 degrees. That's so that you can get it on here. If this thing is bent parallel, you're going to have to try to pull these together to get it on, and it's really tough. Again, you may have to buzz a drill through here to get the holes lined up enough and get the paint out. Okay, so you take your short bolt. Now this points the same direction as the spool guard. So slide it over here and get the bolt started through the holes. And then slip the short spacer through there. Okay, work the bolt the rest of the way through. Lock washer. You probably won't need to cut this bolt off because it's about the right length already. And then we can tighten this up. And notice it's pulling the sides of the cable guide now parallel like they would have been if you had bent them all the way around to overcome the spring back and resulting in a 90-degree bend. But now it's bent by pulling it together with the bolt. So, step 16 says prepare cable by band sanding ends of cable so they will pass through holes in cable drum. When we cut these, we basically just melt it in half with a acetylene torch, and then make sure that the cables are all the strands are part of the little melted area. If you have a little bit of a ball on the end there, it won't probably fit through your cable hole. So if you have to sand it, only sand just enough so it'll fit through there. If you sand all the welded part off, the strands will come apart and then you've got frayed cable. Okay, so then it says, 17 says thread cable through cable guide and through the holes in the cable drum. Okay, so we go through the cable guide, and then as I have the hoist when sitting here, I'm going to go below the drum. Okay. And what I'm going to do is ratchet this around so that the through hole is down on the bottom. Okay, it's right here. So bring it around to the bottom, and then I'll put the cable through that hole, if I can see. And then you can pull a pretty good sized loop through there. And then you take the other end of that loop and you put it down into the blind cable hole. And make sure it goes all the way into the bottom, okay? And then you've got to make sure that you can access the set screw, and then you're going to tighten the set screw. Now keep in mind, this is an aluminum part. If you over tighten this, you could strip the thread, so just good and snug with this little Allen wrench. You can get it pretty tight. I've actually never stripped the thread, but I suppose you could. After you pull the cable through the holes and put it down in the blind hole and tighten the set screw, then you can rotate this so the cable basically going straight out and pull it tight. Okay. Now, you won't probably be able to pull it all the way down in the slot. So we have this sophisticated cable tool here with a flight radius on the end. If you'll just take that, take a hammer and work it down into the slot, because you don't want to have a big lump right there. Okay. Like that. Okay, then step 18 says place the formed end of the cable drum spring in place under the frame pawl spacer. Bend cable drum spring over the cable drum and bolt a long frame spacer in place to hold spring in position. Okay. There's a couple ways you can do this. What it's saying is to take this and feed it through here and then get it over the spacer, like that, and then bend this down and put the spacer through, which is fine. You can also put the spacer in place earlier then just bring the spring through and bend it over it. Notice that I have not yet tightened up the nuts on the fixed hook support. If you tighten those tight, you probably will not be able to get this in here. Okay. Another thing I should mention is the width of the cable area in the drums varies quite a bit because it's a casting. Your spring has to fit freely and have some free play. Make sure you don't have any big bumps from the casting in here, because if you do, when the drum is rotating, the bumps will catch the spring and pull it out, or they can. Okay, so you may have to sand some off the sides of the spring. If you do, make sure you get rid of the sharp edges after you've done that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put the spacer in here. Even with those nuts loose, it's a little bit snug. And put the nut and the washer on. Oh, now here's another one, okay? I'm going to have to go back. I'm going to need about probably 4 threads on this in order for the nut to tighten. Okay, so I'll grab my 5/16 die again. Grab the head of the bolt in the soft jaws. And spin this on there. Careful when you start it, make sure you get it started straight. And then we need some tapping oil. Okay, so we'll put a drop of this tapping oil on there. And 1 and 2, break the chips, and 3 and 4. And then we'll knock the burr off. Just right at the base of the thread. And we'll hit it real quick with the wire wheel. Just clean off anything. Take off any other burrs. Another thing I want to re-emphasize, be careful with this. You'll dent things. So if you're tapping on things, a plastic hammer is a good idea. Also, brass drift. This works well if you get your spacer stuck inside the drum or the handles. Use this, because this won't damage the end of the spacer. It's brass. And then we'll tighten these up. At this point, I'm just going to double check, make sure I got everything tight. Okay, that feels good.